Hello there, and welcome to another exciting episode of Knife Chats. Kind of caught me off guard there. Back in July, when I met Brian Wilhoite at Smoky Mountain Knife Works, he showed me this knife in his office, and when I first saw the knife, I asked him, is that going to be in the Rough Ryder Reserve lineup, because of how impressed I was with the build quality of the knife. This is a Rough Ryder Marlin Spike Knife and Burlap Micarta handles with glow-in-the-dark liners. We'll talk about the glow-in-the-dark liners in a little bit. This is the RR2573, and as you can tell from the box and by the model number, it did not end up in the Rough Ryder Reserve lineup. But I was shocked when he said, nope, it's not going to be, it's just going to be a regular Rough Ryder. But I held it in my hand and I was like, man, this is a beautiful knife. And I already knew a little bit about the knife. I knew it was an older style Marlin Spike knife. I knew it was one that at one time Camillus made, but it is not what you expect. This is the knife. It was made by Camillus during World War II and even a little bit before World War II. I think they might have even been making them in World War I. And what these were a Lend-Lease Marlin Spike knife that they were making for the Royal Navy. When Camillus was making them, their model number was the 7085J72, but the government contract number for it was the Class 251, and I believe, but I'm not 100% sure, that the Royal Navy referred to this as their number 2 Marlin Spike or their number 2 jackknife. I'm not 100% sure on that. The person who probably knows more about that than anyone is Slick Slicers. And just so you can see what I'm talking about, let me show you a knife that Slick Slicers sent me a while back as a gift, and you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's the knife from Slick Slicers. Eric sent this to me out of the goodness of his heart because he had seen some videos that I did on Marlin Spike knives, and he said that the knife I was showing as a Royal Navy knife was actually a British Army knife, and that the Royal Navy actually used a different knife than the British Army, and that they did not use one with a can opener. And so he sent this one to me, and this one is of all steel construction. This thing is built like a tank. Belonged to somebody at one time. There's the name. And you can see the heavy clevis on the end here and the screwdriver tip, similar to what you're seeing here, except this clevis is much lighter, and you have the screwdriver tip there. And also, as you can tell, instead of an all-metal handle that is on this knife, which is something that I believe they started doing sometime during World War II, because knives are falling apart, especially in the South Pacific, where mildew and rot was just destroying everything. So that's why they went, I believe, with the all-metal construction. And you see that in later knives used by the Royal Navy, as well as the British Army knives. That's why they all turned into all stainless steel. In any case, this was the Royal Navy knife that showed up at either the end of World War II or maybe at the beginning of World War II, somewhere around there. Now this blade has been used quite a bit, but it was a sheepfoot blade or a ram's foot blade at one time. And this one is by Harrison Brothers in Sheffield, England. And you got the Marlin Spike on the other side over here. Nothing locks on this knife, and nothing will lock on this knife either. But it's just a beautiful knife, and heavy as not. And this one is right at, what is this? Coming in at 4.5 inches, about 4 7/8 inches with the screwdriver tip down there. Now this knife is a little bit longer. This one comes in at 4 3/4 inches, actually 4 7/8 inches without the screwdriver, and with the screwdriver about 5 1/8 inches long. But that spec fits well with what Camillus was doing with their knives for the Lend-Lease program when they were turning out the Class 251 knife for the British Royal Navy. The Camillus number, if I did not mention it, is 7085J72. And that's what this knife is based off of, is the old Camillus knife. And speaking of old Camillus knives, I have one that they made for the British Army, not the Royal Navy. This is a British Army knife. You can tell that because it has the 10 cutter here. And this was made for either the Commonwealth Forces or for the British Army. And I'm not exactly sure when it was made. I don't know if it was made for World War I or World War II, because the tang is pretty hard to read. I know it was made by Camillus, and this features a bone handle, and the blade here was not modified or anything. This was a spear point blade, which was something that you would find on British Army knives, especially during World War I. Spear point blades or a sheep foot blade were both used on the British Army knives at the time. And this has a half stop going on here, and it also has a half stop on the Marlin Spike. And also note here, if you can tell there, that is a brass clevis going on with this knife. Otherwise you have steel going on, and this was carbon steel, 1095 carbon steel with steel pins as well. Now the Rough Ryder, that's the one we're going to look at now, the 2573, is so much different than the earlier Rough Ryder Marlin Spike knives. You should have known that right away, because simply by the size, 5 inches versus basically 4 1/4 inches or 4 1/2 inches. See the difference of size there? And just look at the size difference in blades. This is the one in black micarta. This is the last of the Marlin Spike knives that Rough Ryder had released in this this size. Let's look at the difference in blade here. See that, man? Look at the size difference in blades. It is just an amazingly large knife with a beautiful ram's foot blade there. Now, also, some of you may be familiar with the Schrade Marlin Spike knife, which looks a little similar to the Rough Ryder, but as you can see, it is also much smaller. Matter of fact, when you get right down to it, the Schrade is actually a little bit smaller than the Rough Ryder Marlin Spike knife. These are based off of the other Camillus knives. These were based off of, I believe, Schrade. I think Schrade was making them this way. And you can see the blade difference in size here as well when you're comparing it to this new knife. Much, much smaller blade. Both are more or less a ram's foot blade, but this one is a much more substantial blade. And you're going to pay for it in weight as well. But all in all, I'm really impressed with this knife. Is it perfect? Is any knife really perfect? There are a couple things that you have to watch out for with this knife, just like you have to watch out for with the original Royal Navy knives. And that is the clevis here. You know, it will come up like that, and if you let this blade drop, boom, you are going to have one heck of a nick in your blade. So you got to make sure the clevis is out of the way when you're closing the blade. And obviously there is a half stop, but the blade is not a locking blade, so you better know how to use a slip joint. And the same thing with the Marlin Spike. It does not lock. It has a half stop, which I think is actually good, because if you're one of those people who sometimes want to work it like so, it is locked in place quite well at the half, as well as when it's completely open. So that is a good thing too. Some people may find that the screwdriver gets in the way when you're working with the Marlin Spike down here. I don't think it's that big of an issue, and it's nice to have a screwdriver down here because it's nice to have that little extra feature down there. And it does work. It's a good size screwdriver going on. As for the build quality of this thing, it's really simply amazing. And I will be getting another one. You can see right there, look at that. Putting it right down the middle. That's just the natural fall of it. Same thing with the Marlin Spike, almost straight down the middle. And that is not always the case. Now, obviously this one's been used a little bit, but you can see it drops to one side. That one's pretty straight. That favors one side. Of course, this is also probably 70, 80 years old. So hopefully this knife will be doing as good in 70 or 80 years. You've got a nice satin finish going on with everything. It is all stainless steel throughout. You do have a nice ring there. You've got the brown burlap micarta. And would I like to see it in other material? Well, I'm hoping to see it in other materials. I'm hoping that more of these knives come out. But I do kind of understand the use of the brown burlap micarta, and it's not a bad choice. You also notice it says here with glow-in-the-dark liners. And if you look closely, you can see that there is a different material underneath the liners. It's a brownish color, and that will glow once it's fully charged, but it better be pretty dark if you want to actually see it, because if it's just a low light condition, you're not going to notice it glowing. But if it's really pitch black, you will actually see the glowing on the blade itself. You'll see the glow on the side. You don't get nearly as much light on the back side of the liners because of how fat the Marlin Spike is. So that almost covers it up, so you don't get a lot of light shining onto it. So the back side will not glow nearly as well as the front side unless you have the spike open and you actually sit there and charge it fully. And it does not, in my opinion, seem to glow as long as some of the other glow-in-the-dark knives that Rough Ryder makes. But to be honest with you, I had forgotten all about the glow-in-the-dark feature of the knife when I saw this show up in the on the Rough Ryder website, or I'm sorry, the SMKW website. I saw this knife show up, and it's like, oh, I'm ordering it, and I ordered it right away. Did not have a clue what the box looked like or anything. I just knew it was in brown burlap micarta, and it showed up, and it was like, man, this is awesome. And I opened the blade, and it's like, oh man, that is so strong and so positive. I let it slam. It's like, oh man, is that actually hitting the back spring? And then I opened it up, and if you look down in there, you can see it. It has a lock bar going on, so the blade actually, the kick is actually hitting the lock bar there. So the blade is actually set up so that it will not have any blade wrap. So what you're hearing when this thing closes is the blade hitting the lock bar in the back there. So that's pretty cool too. As for this, yeah, you got some slapping going on. It slaps right there, but that's not a big deal, because if you notice, the spike is not hitting the end there. And you've got a spike that runs the full length, which is pretty cool. See, this one's a little shorter, and this one is also a little shorter. And that is not worn down, that's just where it falls. But this one, you get the full Monty of a Marlin Spike going on there. And this thing just feels good in the hand. It feels like a substantial knife. This is one that if you are in the world out there cutting rope and stuff, this is something you're probably going to really like. It's a big, beefy knife, and it is made to take some damage, so that's pretty cool. Can you pound on the back of it? I don't know, but I do know one thing. I will probably be buying a couple more of these, and these are not the cheapest Rough Ryder knife out there. They are probably about $15 more than these smaller ones. But I tell you what, this thing, it just feels like quality in the hand. And that's why when I first picked it up, the first question I asked Brian was, is this going to be in the Rough Ryder Reserve lineup? Because I thought for sure the quality of this makes it a Rough Ryder Reserve. The only reason it's not a Rough Ryder Reserve, 440A stainless steel, and you know, a lower price, and maybe it doesn't fit in the metal tube. But really nice artwork on the box too, tugboat on the back and everything else. I don't know. As you can tell, I'm pretty excited about this knife. I'm really happy to show it, and it's got such a wonderful history behind the pattern itself. This is not your typical American-made Marlin Spike knife, because this was a knife that Camillus made for Royal Navy specifications. So this is based off of an American knife made for the British Navy, and I don't know, it's just a cool knife. Anyway, hope you enjoyed looking at it as much as I enjoyed showing it. Stick around for some slides. Let me take just a second to thank you once again for dropping by and spending a few minutes here at Knife Chats with the Pious. I really do appreciate it, and I do appreciate any comments that you leave. So please remember to give me that thumbs up, and also don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you'll know when the next episode is up and running. Thanks again for dropping by. Really do appreciate your time here.